is Louisa Clarke from the Human-centric workplace. Yes, she's my co-founder and my co-author, and the ant to the deck. Welcome to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's really a pleasure to be here. And we've already had some really brilliant talks this morning, haven't we? And you know what? I'm here to talk about the human. It's a theme, isn't it? It's a theme. Okay, so I want to talk about why leadership capability is now critical infrastructure. Okay, most conversations about the future of facilities management begin with technology. Digital platforms, automation, data, AI. That makes sense. FM has been shaped by innovation and technology, but never in a simple and uniform way. Some parts of our sector have moved quickly, others moved more cautiously. And many are still operating across ageing estates, long-term contracts, regulatory exposure, and systems that were never designed to talk to one another. This isn't a story of technology racing ahead. It's a story of uneven adoption, complex trade-offs, and decisions made under pressure in a world of fast-paced change and turbulence. And this is exactly why leadership capability now matters more than at any other point in FM's history. Leadership capability is critical infrastructure. So before we go any further, let's ground this in reality. How many of you are operating with a mix of old systems, new platforms, workarounds, spreadsheets, and well-intentioned manual processes? What was that?
Everybody else is lying.
They're lying. They are. They're lying because I think we all know the truth. And how many of you are making decisions with partial data, inconsistent dashboards, or information that arrives too late to be truly useful? And how many of you even trust the data you get? And how many of you are being asked to modernise services while holding risk, cost, safety, and service continuity at the same time? Some people are being really honest. Let me ask you something. At 7 a.m. in the morning, when a building isn't working, when a client is waiting, and when the dashboard says one thing and the engineer says another, who makes the call? It's not the system. It's not the AI. The leader does. And that moment right there is why leadership capability is critical infrastructure. That's the real operating environment of FM. It's not a clean slate, not a greenfield transformation, but change laid on top. But change laid on top of live estates, live contracts, and live risk. Leadership sits at the centre of that. And if FM was simple, right, we'd all be out of a job by lunchtime. We know it's not simple. Okay. We've updated systems, dashboards, CAFM, sensors, and automation. But in many places, we're still leading as if the operating environment is slower and simpler than it really is. With decision-making, governance, and management models that were designed, and even that's probably been a bit kind, to be honest, but they were designed for a very different era than the one we're in today. And to be clear, FM hasn't stood still, has it? This sector kept hospitals running through a pandemic. It kept people safe, warm, and supported when the world was uncertain. We've been working to modernise estates, professionalise standards, and deliver extraordinary services under pressure. This is not a sector that lacks commitment. It's a sector of skilled, hard-working people carrying extraordinary responsibility. But what it now deserves is leadership that matches the complexity that it holds. Facilities management today operates at the intersection of technology, space, process, people and profit. That pressure comes from all directions. Clients expect transparency and confidence, organisations expect efficiency and resilience, and regulators expect assurance. And your teams, they expect clarity and support from you. What's changing is not just the tools available to us, but the volume and complexity of the decisions leaders are now required to make, often with imperfect information. Okay. Recent UK analysis by Alexa shows that a significant proportion of the organisational investment aimed at future-proofing operations is directed towards technology and AI, while a much smaller proportion is focused on leadership and capability development. And the IWFM 2025 Market Insight Report reinforces this gap. 86% of FM leaders say technologies such as advanced HVAC, IoT and machine learning will drive growth, yet at the same time, 39% of organisations are reporting recruitment and retention as difficult. 55% of local government workplace and facilities managers say retention is difficult, and 18 to 13% of organisations have no retention strategy at all. Technology is accelerating, human capacity is under pressure. Now that doesn't mean that technology investment is wrong, it means that leadership capability is often assumed to stretch to meet it. And that assumption is risky, because performance in FM does not come from systems alone. It comes from judgment. The judgment leaders make about priorities, risk, people, contracts, and the trade-offs that sit between them. When leadership capability is not deliberately developed alongside technology, the risk doesn't announce itself with an alarm or failure, it builds quietly. Decisions begin to slow, confidence starts to thin, and risk drifts closer to the edge before anyone realises how exposed the organisation has become. Okay. Gallup's research showed that around 70% of the difference in how engaged people feel at work is explained by the quality of their immediate manager. In other words, with the same systems, the same contracts and the same conditions, the way a team performs is largely shaped by how it is led. And McKinsey's global analysis reinforces this, showing that organisations with strong leadership development are more than twice as likely to outperform their peers financially, even in highly operational, asset-heavy sectors like facilities management. So when leadership capability does not keep pace with complexity, performance doesn't collapse, it weakens gradually. Because as I've said, leadership capability is critical infrastructure. Leadership risk made real. This isn't about failure, it's about how leadership is created. Having worked my way up through FM myself, I've seen too many capable people promoted into leadership without ever being given the knowledge, skills and behaviours needed to actually lead. Not because they didn't care, and not because they weren't committed, but because our sector has historically had low barriers to entry and promotion, which makes it far too often for organisations to assume leadership will somehow take care of itself. Now, some organisations do approach it with real discipline, but many, however, still rely on informal progression. We promote technical excellence. We reward firefighting. We even see being invisible as a win. We move people up because they know the contract or because they know they've been there the longest. And then we expect them to operate in environments that are complex, high risk and commercially exposed, often without ever being properly equipped to do so. That is not a people problem. That's a leadership design problem, and it leads to a difficult truth. The most dangerous thing in FM right now isn't old buildings, it's underdeveloped leadership. How history explains this moment. Every industrial revolution has followed the same pattern. The first mechanised production, the second brought electricity and mass scale. The fourth, the one that we're in now, the third introduced digital systems and computing, and the fourth, the one that we're in now, is about intelligent, connected technologies augmenting human judgment. Each time technology expanded what was possible. But what's the difference now? The difference now is speed. Previous revolutions unfolded over decades. This one is compressing into years. Leadership determined whether organisations actually benefited from each shift, and that is exactly where FM now finds itself. The hidden human cost. Judgment, prioritisation, ethics, trust and sense-making matter more now, not less. Yet leaders today are making more decisions with less certainty and under greater visibility than ever before. Your systems provide data, but they don't remove ambiguity. Your automation reduces risk, but it doesn't remove responsibility. And AI supports insight, but it does not carry accountability. And Gallagher's 2025 Employee Communications Report highlighted change fatigue as a growing barrier to organisational performance, not because people resist change, but because sustained adaptation without clarity erodes judgment. This isn't about resilience training, it's about leadership conditions. People perform best when expectations are clear, when priorities are understood, and when they feel safe to surface issues early. Those conditions do not emerge by accident, they are created by leadership behaviour. Leadership capability is critical infrastructure. There is still a lingering assumption that FM must choose between investing in technology or investing in people. This framing is so outdated. We feel forced to choose because technology shows up as a capital investment, while people show up as a cost, even though both determine whether the organisations actually work. Technology expands capability. Leadership converts capability into performance. Technology only delivers value when behaviour supports it. At the Human-centric workplace, we express this as people plus profit equals performance. Because in complex, asset-heavy environments like FM, neither people nor profit is sustainable without leadership capable of holding them in balance. The future of FM depends on alignment, how space is used, how work flows through process, and how technology informs decisions, and how people connect to commercial outcomes. Leadership is what holds all of this together. And look, AI and the changing nature of leadership, because AI has added another layer of complexity to this conversation. The early narrative focused on replacement, that's shifted. We've heard maybe a little bit about this augmented today, but research from Gartner and the World Economic Forum consistently shows that AI creates the greatest value when it augments human judgment rather than attempting to replace it. That distinction matters deeply in facilities management, a sector built on risk, safety, trust, and continuity of service. AI does not reduce the need for leadership, it raises the standard required of it. And it turns out algorithms are very good at finding patterns, but not so good at explaining them to a client at 7 a.m. in the morning when the building isn't operating as expected. And AI can't yet connect the whole picture and make informed decisions. That requires leadership. So, what does the roadmap really demand for our future leaders? If leadership capability is critical infrastructure, then it must be designed with the same discipline as any other infrastructure. At the Human-centric workplace, we frame this through 4 leadership pillars that every modern organisation has to get right. Leading yourself, leading others, leading the organisation, and leading communication. In FM, these are not abstract ideas, they are operational necessities. Human-centric leadership is often misinterpreted as empathy in isolation. It is far more disciplined than that. It's a structured approach to ensuring that people, systems, and commercial outcomes remain aligned under pressure. And the framework rests on 4 governing dimensions. Leading yourself. Leaders must regulate their own judgment before they can influence systems. Self-awareness, cognitive discipline, boundary management, protect decision quality. Without self-leadership, complexity overwhelms. Leading your people. Psychological safety, clarity of expectation, and consistent feedback create the conditions for performance. When individuals feel safe to surface risk early, organisations reduce exposure. This is not about comfort, it's about operational intelligence. Leading the organisation. Strategy, structure, and governance determine whether technology translates into value. Leaders must align purpose, process, and commercial reality. Human-centric leadership does not resist performance targets, it strengthens them. And finally, leading communication. In complex systems, communication is structural. Ambiguity amplifies the risk, precision reduces it. So leaders must communicate with clarity, not volume. These 4 dimensions form a governing architecture. They're not personality traits. They're a system of capabilities. These are not soft skills. They are operational infrastructure. Because as I've said many times before, leadership capability is critical infrastructure. And there's a quiet cost of getting this wrong. In fact, it's not really quiet. FM understands the visible risk. System outages, building failures, compliance breaches, these are all things we design for, insure against, and invest to prevent. We fund systems because outages are costly. We invest in buildings because failure is visible. We invest in compliance because risk is unacceptable. But leadership failure works differently. It doesn't announce itself with alarms and incident reports. It shows up later in contracts that quietly come under pressure, in teams that are exhausted, and in clients who no longer trust the partnership in the way that they once did. And listen, poor management costs UK organisations over £23 billion each year through disengagement, absence and turnover. And that cost is running straight through FM. Leadership capability is not operational investment, it's a control risk. And when leadership is right, FM becomes easier to run. Decisions get clearer, teams raise issues earlier, and clients feel steadier. And technology finally does what it was always supposed to do, support people rather than overwhelm them. So, what I'd like to leave you with is this. When you leave this room and look at your roadmap, every technology programme, every capital investment, every digital transformation, ask one additional question. Not just, is the system ready, but do we have the leadership capability required to operate this environment well, now and when the curveball hits? Because leadership capability is critical infrastructure. And if your technology investment doubled tomorrow, would your leadership capability be strong enough to turn it into better outcomes? Or would it simply reveal more cracks in how the organisation really leads? The future of facilities management will not be defined by what we install. It will be defined by how well we lead. It will not be decided by who buys the best systems, but by who builds leaders capable of operating in permanent complexity. Technology will keep expanding what is possible, but leadership will decide whether it turns into value, trust and performance. And the organisations that treat leadership capability as critical infrastructure will not simply keep up with the future of FM, they will shape it. Thank you.